Hey everyone, I'm Boom.
And I'm Spice. And I feel like I say this every episode, but this is a very special episode of Boom and Spice Book Advice. For we are finally covering a book that we like again. This is the episode featuring Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It is one of the most creative novels I've ever read. It is a pillar of the Gothic lit genre. It is so impressive and long that Boom has a Google Docs page open about it right now. And from the looks of it, it's bulleted and it has just individual words.
Yeah, well, okay. This is just, I like to have this up so we stay, just as if we haven't gotten our written
Oh,
down.
so that's the.
This was here for, this is
That's
still
the
titled.
timeline.
This is
Oh.
still titled Mary Shelley's Frankenstein,
I
episode
see.
1, with Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird under it with 0 bullet points.
Which makes all the sense in the world.
Because this trend of me doing the Google Doc didn't keep up as much as I thought it might.
That's really funny.
I don't know. I like to have something in front of me to keep me on my path.
And the thing is, the very different books, the 3 books we've read thus far, and I feel as though the bulleted list didn't work for To Kill a Mockingbird in part because it sucked. Because it was a bad book for bad people.
For bad people.
For people.
You read To Kill a Mockingbird.
Including us.
We hate you.
we
I
hate
know
you.
I hate me.
We hate you and us. Boom and Spice hate advice. Exactly. That's what I learned from To Kill a Mockingbird. But with Rebecca, this is a much more regimented book. It feels as though it was workshopped for decades. And it's a book that once you pick it up, you won't want to put it down. So I hope you join us for this podcast, and I sincerely hope that you read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. The chirping that you hear is not a bird, it's not a plane, it's Sheldon the cat making a reappearance on the podcast.
Back again. He's now in 2/3 of the main series podcast.
Exactly.
Becoming a staple. We'll
Oh
see.
man. Yeah, the podcat.
The podcat. There
Exactly. He doesn't know anything about Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier.
we go. Presumably.
So, yeah, so that we know of in this language. So we will not be giving him the mic. If you hear his interjections, it's not by choice. And I hope you enjoy
Yes.
them anyways.
Yep. He's just got strong opinions.
On
Sometimes you can't
literature.
control it.
So, starting the non-spoiler section, would you rather do Spark Notes or read it in its entirety?
I think for this book, it'd be worth your time to read it in its whole. Because I feel if you were to Spark Note it, you would lose a lot of just that page turning suspense, needing to figure out what happens next. That would all be gone for you, and that was a big part of my experience with this book.
So, I concur. However, in a similar vein to Frankenstein, I own a copy of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I don't know why I feel the need to say the entire title every time. Maybe because it almost sounds like I'm referring to a woman named Rebecca, but instead it's a proper noun. Well, those are also proper nouns. I mean a specific book named Boom and Spice Grammar Advice, ladies and gentlemen. So, in this case, this book is just about 400 pages long, and it is it's thick. Every page is covered by words, which is not the case in To Kill a Mockingbird. It's a lot more spaced out. So, if you do not have the time to read Rebecca, you really should try to make the time. However, schedules are schedules. School is school. Take the L listen to the audiobook, read the ebook, you know, Spark Notes it, Schmoop it, you know, Thug Notes it. I'm sure they've got a Thug Notes for it. But when you get the chance, read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. We're going to have a little debate on the podcast later about which book was better, Frankenstein or Rebecca, because To Kill a Mockingbird isn't. But
yeah, which of the two options in this third episode
exactly.
do we like the best?
Oh man, I hope that pattern doesn't continue. I don't want it to be.
I feel like it won't.
Yeah, the even numbers suck. I'm afraid. So, yeah, that'll come up. It's a great book, but if you don't have the time, you don't have the time. So schmoop it, take it in however you can. Watch the movie. It's got a pretty faithful adaptation by Hitchcock. Come back to it. It's worth your time, 100%.
Yep. Maybe if you get assigned To Kill a Mockingbird, you can read this in its place.
Yeah, in lieu of it.
And Spark Notes that.
That'd be so nice.
You gotta pick one.
Exactly. If you're on a desert island and you've got to eat one book and read the other, I know To Kill a Mockingbird is not as long as Rebecca.
You won't get as much substance.
Maybe,
but
eat
your
the,
life might be, burn
enriched,
brighter
yeah.
and extinguish faster.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
not always
yeah,
the
one of
worst
those
case.
live
My
fast,
candle
leave
burns
a
at both ends.
yeah, exactly. That sort of live fast and leave a hot corpse, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Exactly. Eat To Kill a Mockingbird, or
Enjoy Rebecca.
yeah, you could eat the covers of Rebecca. Like I like the cover
We'll allow it.
of Rebecca, but it's not necessary for enjoying the book necessarily. So don't do that unless you're on a desert island, though. This is a little boom and
Free
spice.
advice.
Yeah, a little boom and free advice. That's the podcast.
Pre-advice to
Oh,
the book advice.
I was under the impression that
This advice is free.
exactly.
Buckos.
Yeah,
Wait along.
is there a black market for book advice that you're involved in? Exactly. I'll slide you $5 for your takes on Virginia Woolf. Please, I need Chinua Achebe takes. Things fall apart. How'd you feel about it? Please.
Well,
It feels very food, water, atmosphere. It's like the same deal. Oh, man. So, is there something we're missing besides whether we liked it or not in the non-spoiler section?
no, I guess not. I mean, I think we're about ready to move on.
Oh,
For
fantastic.
those of you, who want to read this book without hearing about it, which I recommend, we both probably recommend, you can feel free to tune out now.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I wouldn't blame you for skipping on to read Rebecca. Like, if you've got a date and you're, like, kind of feeling them, but, like, you're not too sure, the vibes weren't necessarily great. So you're, like, going to Olive Garden, you like the breadsticks, but, the endless soup and salad bowl doesn't really speak to you at all. Read Rebecca instead. Or, not like a funeral or like a wedding. Those things will never come back around. But you could read it like on the way to the wedding if you Uber. So that's some boom and spice book advice. By
I
chance.
always read on my way to weddings.
Of course. All the weddings I go to as a 20-year-old man with no wife. I feel like once you get married, the floodgates open in terms of going to weddings. I don't know from experience. It just seems like something that would make sense.
I guess we'll find out.
Spice wedding advice. So on that very drawn out note, if you want to join us later for the spoiler section, feel free. I'm going to be ecstatic to have you back. Leave in the comments how much you enjoyed this book if you read it. I know you will. And until next time, oh, you know what? I almost forgot. Got a tease for the next episode.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
for
then-
those who won't be sticking around.
Exactly. If you're leaving, please, I implore you, look into Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. It is the first, not quite fiction book that we've read for this podcast. It's meta commentary on writing in general and women's places in it. And it is an important book. It is very, it's very relevant still today. The fact that every time people congratulate gay people for coming out or representation in media, and white people throw up their hands and go, why does it matter? A Room of One's Own will spotlight that a bit for you. It's a very good book in terms of gaining perspective.
So you're telling me we're going to have 2 good books in a row.
I certainly hope so.
That's what I'm talking about.
I was like, you're telling me there's a chance.
I'll take it.
Exactly. And on that note, he's been Boom, and I've been Spice. It's Boom and Spice Book Advice. And please join us later for the spoiler section. All right.
Later is upon us.
Exactly. Time flies when you're having book fun. So, Boom. Boom. Please give me your thoughts on Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier.
I really enjoyed Rebecca, especially for a book that wouldn't normally be one that I would take from the shelf, that I visited the library on my own. This book really spoke to me. And for me, I know we're going to end up comparing it to Frankenstein later,
Of course.
so I don't want to now, but it had a couple similarities that I wasn't expecting. But it was great. The suspense in this novel is more than I've seen in the past. Like, I don't know that I've read any book that's had me quite so gripped in this way. I mean, I've loved books, but not in the way that I just am so, like, anxious about what's going to happen to this unnamed person.
And it's so...
And then
I
it
didn't
pays...
cut you off.
No
my
problem.
apologies.
And then it pays off when you get there. You know, it's not
Exactly.
like an empty winding you up. By the time you get to the end, you feel good about where you got.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but you touched on something really interesting, because this book is old. Not old in the grand scheme of things when it comes to, like, books at large, but in terms of, like by people years, really old. Like,
in people years.
Exactly. So, people don't typically know what happens in Rebecca. And the twists within are preserved. And you are left guessing the entire time. So, if inexplicably someone here really wants to read the book and hasn't read it and is still here, get out. Get out right
Go
now.
away.
Exactly. I don't want
gave you a
here.
chance.
Exactly. This is like a railroad crossing. Like, get out. The lights are flashing. The gates are down. You must leave. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. So, the most interesting part of this book for me, potentially, is the fact that the way it sits, this is explained to me by a professor, where it's similar to The Great Gatsby, where it did not mean to, but it foretold a fall in society, in this case in Britain, in our case in America, where it was a great state of decay, and Manderley is sort of seen as a symbol for that decay, and the way that privileged rich people lost status in the wake of the world wars in the early 1900s, and the general disarray when it came to economics around the time. This book being set in the 1930s, The Great Gatsby being set in the 1920s. Great Gatsby, on accident, sort of foretold the fall of the Gilded Age, the sort of roaring 20s, in terms of the way all the rich people within that novel sort of imploded on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's a book that we're definitely going to cover, I feel like it was important to note the similarities between these two novels because it's a historical context that is very crucial to understanding what's going on with Manderley and how it's sort of falling in reputation and the way Miss Danvers sort of wants to protect it. It's falling in reputation not just because of society, but also because of the actions of Max
Mm-hmm.
and Maxim. So I felt like that was important to get out there. Did you
Yeah, I like that point a lot. I don't think I considered it quite like that. But absolutely, when you get to the end of the book and Manderley is burning, and I guess that could be very symbolic of the fall, especially too because as much as they're the heroes of our book, they've done wrong. This man murdered his wife. It's not. It's a these not so innocent superpowers ending up crumbling on themselves from their own actions.
Exactly, they're hubris. And it's interesting that you phrase them as heroes, because there's a bit of a difference between a protagonist and a hero necessarily. They're not one and the same.
True.
And that nuance is sort of shown here, where Maxim and the unnamed main character, which we will get to, we've gotta, that's so interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
It's very important that you realize that everyone is cast in a shade of gray here. Miss Danvers has some right to be upset, obviously. Her best friend and employer was murdered and in cold blood, and her murderer and ex-husband has since taken up a different wife who now resides in her bed. Or not in her bed, but in her stead, rather, in place of Rebecca. And it's absolutely crucial to think about these characters in such a way that, no one walks out of this without mud on their hands.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
And
a very good point.
in Maxim's case, blood on their hands. And in Miss Danvers' case, obviously. How do you feel about the unnamed narrator, the fact that she is left nameless?
I think that's pretty cool. It was something as I was beginning to read, I was just like, am I missing something here? Like, I read back for a second. I'm like, this person just doesn't have a name. But yeah, then you get into it, and it's like that's a pretty significant part of this book.
Exactly.
That is a person who could be any person,
Mm-hmm.
and can represent many. Yeah.
Yeah, many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm
exactly.
going for. It can represent you.
And
represent
me. And Sheldon, everybody. And it speaks to the classism within the book that Rebecca dominates the book. She is, the book is dripping in Rebecca. She is on every page. She's foreboding. And while it's not a supernatural book, it feels supernatural. She's a cloud.
100%.
She casts shadows upon every character, and she illuminates the traits that lie beneath. And the fact that the peasant girl who is plucked out of obscurity to fill her shoes is left literally nameless is absolutely crucial in understanding the classist aspects of this book.
Because if she were given a name in this novel, it wouldn't have mattered in
Exactly,
the
it'd be
slightest.
irrelevant.
Because it's Rebecca's home.
If you look at my cover on my book, in terms of it's a Harper Publishing book. It's from Barnes and Noble, I believe. And on top of it, it says Rebecca, Daphne du Maurier, the classic tale of romantic suspense. And on top of it, it has the giant cursive script R written across the front and on the side. And I feel as though that is the book in a nutshell, where the characters move and act, but Rebecca is always there. And she creates a foreboding presence without ever being present. Meanwhile, our protagonist, our main character, could almost be taken out of the story and everything would happen the way it did. Replace her with anyone else, and she would still serve the same purpose. And that touches in a similar way to Frankenstein in terms of autonomy and the way women are treated. These books are a lot more fixated on women's places in society. In this case, lower class women, when Mary Shelley's, it was women at large. And I feel like that's an important way of looking at this. And it contrasts heavily with To Kill a Mockingbird, where with that, the only socio-political themes that we could draw were the ones that were thrown in our face, and we grasped at straws for anything more. Rebecca doesn't try to be progressive. It's only meant to highlight themes that were merely factual, just absolute truths within this novel, within the time of this novel in Europe. And I feel like it knocks the ball out of the park in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh. Now, there was something I wanted to talk about specifically with this book. Now that you bring in that tie to Frankenstein. And it was something that we really liked in Frankenstein, and it was that framing device.
Yes. Yes, the fact that this book opens with that cold open and circles back.
Absolutely.
This book may feel dated or may feel run of the mill, but this is an absolute revelation when it came out. As a matter of fact, on the Wikipedia page for Rebecca, there's an entire footnote of the first line and how iconic it is. The line reads, Chapter 1, Page 1. Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. It seemed to me I stood by the iron gate leading to the drive, and for a while I could not enter, for the way was barred to me. There was a padlock and a chain upon the gate. I called in my dream to the lodge-keeper, and had no answer. And peering closer through the rusted spokes of the gate, I saw that the lodge was uninhabited. It is haunting. It's nearly dystopian. It's as if someone dropped a bomb on your house. Nothing's there, no one's there, you're not there, and you're supposed to be. And that is chilling. And you're left chewing on that for like the next 300 pages.
Yeah. They don't give it to you at all for a long time. And that's something, and I gotta say, I think I like this opening more than I liked the letters in Frankenstein, just for the pure, like, impact that they have on you within sentences. Frankenstein, when we open that book, you read for a little while, like, I think I described it as like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's writing letters, where's the monster? And I guess partially that's on my expectations of what I thought Frankenstein was.
Yeah, Rebecca.
This book, I had no expectations. I was completely open to this. And almost refreshed when I saw a cool framing device, because I was like, oh wow, I really like this a lot in the first book I saw it in. And then, yeah, they really, just like you said, the dystopian feel. And then, yeah, and then how long it takes you, just that slow burn you talk about, getting you all the way there.
Exactly.
And then you figure out, because even in the end of the book, when you figure out, you know, when Maxim admits to murdering Rebecca, he never loved her, you still, like, she's telling this from not where she's at, and there's nothing right now that's, you know, you start to see the crumbling of Manderley and, like, how he might get convicted for this, but it never seems certain, and he gets off for it. So that whole book, you're like, where are they at? What is happening? Because we know they're there,
Yep.
and it's getting late in this book for them not to be there. So I think that's really well done.
Do you know the term dramatic irony?
Mhm.
Yeah. So for anyone listening at home that doesn't know, dramatic irony is when a character or someone viewing a text knows something that other characters do not know, and it creates tension, sometimes for comedy, sometimes for suspense. And in this case, it's almost reverse dramatic irony, where we know something happens. We know that eventually her idyllic paradise is left completely unrecognizable. But we don't know how at all. But we're sitting there thinking, oh man, how's this going to happen? Like, how is this going to turn out? How does this come about? And it ratchets up the suspense immeasurably.
Yep. Yep. I was thinking as we figure out that Maxim is the murderer, it's like, oh, there it is. That's what we're here for. Climax. There we go. Now let's see it unfold. And it wasn't really so. You spend almost the entire rest of the book. I mean, the entire rest of the book still wanting it. And it's not until the very last bit where they're riding back and they see that glow in the sky.
Exactly.
Oh man, that was it.
Yep. And it's telling that there's only been one adaptation of note in a long time, at least on my radar, and that it was Hitchcock who did it. It's tough. You could do it To Kill a Mockingbird so easily, but there's so much you'd have to pick and choose with Rebecca, and so much time you'd have to spend building and climbing that it's almost unfeasible. And that she had the patience to write a book like this is absolutely mind-boggling. Frankenstein sort of laid the groundwork for this, but the suspense within Frankenstein is not strung out nearly as long as the suspense in Rebecca. It's these two books are inextricably linked. They're absolutely peas in a pod. I just think that Rebecca learned from not necessarily mistakes, but took things to another level. It improved upon things that were already good.
Yeah.
It made them even better.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I normally lean towards books that are like Frankenstein in the science fiction world. But like you were saying, this book almost has that sort of supernatural element that is
Absolutely.
Rebecca looming over our unnamed narrator's presence the entire book. And looking at the cover of this book, that script R is such a good symbol for how Rebecca has an effect on the narrator.
Exactly.
From the moment she sees that slanting hand writing R on all of this, on the note left to Maxim for one, but that's when it really starts because she gets to call him Max.
Yep.
And from there on, she just dominates every thought that she has.
Exactly. And
about herself, about her husband, about who she should try to be.
Exactly. It's absolutely, I find it so interesting the way they build this book. The way that there's so little given before the end. It feels like you're slowly climbing, and then eventually it's a race. And it makes you not want to put it down, which I feel like is super important when it comes to books like these. This book could be a slog, and it's not, and it's an absolute credit to the writing by Dabney du Maurier.
Absolutely. That's 100%. Just an excellent style of writing to keep you drawn in for so long.
And this book almost spoils you, because I took a class in Gothic literature. That's how I came upon this.
Okay.
And it fills the tropes of Gothic literature to a T in terms of imposing buildings that hold symbolic importance, terms of time being a theme. There's incest plays into it, things of foreboding, mystery and noir, like sort of play into the genre. There's more to it than that, but this is a great primer to that genre. If Gothic literature did not speak to you before, and the themes of decay, of falling apart, falling into ruin, it's absolutely present here. And eventually we've discussed, it's sort of in pre-production of it, the idea of doing a series on H.P. Lovecraft and looking at him critically and the opinions that he held, and thinking of how you can contextualize that today and reading it in such a way that you don't Trojan horse those ideas into you. And it is interesting that he touches on decay as a theme so much in such a similar way. His is sort of a quasi-Gothic literature in a sense. But beyond that, how would you, to compare Frankenstein and Rebecca, these two very similar books, which one would you prefer and why?
This is one I've been stewing on for a little while, because even as I just finished Rebecca, it was my assumption that I was going to say Frankenstein when we did this episode, because I knew we were going to compare them. There's only really two to compare here.
Exactly.
And it's tough for me, because there are a lot of aspects of Frankenstein that just lend themselves to my taste. Science fiction, Frankenstein is something... Frankenstein, the book, and the Young Frankenstein, as a musical and a movie, have been something I've seen a lot. My family members have starred in, they've been a part of the musicals. So I guess nostalgia was kind of just like, this is it. This is the one you like. Boom.
Boom.
Intimidating. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it was a beast. But looking at it purely objectively, I think that I had an easier, being a longer book, I had a lot easier time enjoying Rebecca the entire way through. It was one I wanted to pick it up more often than I wanted to read Frankenstein. And that's not saying I didn't with Frankenstein. That's purely just, this was a book that I would sit in my car and listen to as I got to somewhere.
Yep.
Because I had to figure out what was going to happen
Exactly.
by the end of this chapter, or I couldn't go on to work today. And that wasn't quite the case with Frankenstein. I was really wrapped into that suspense, and that's not really there. And that's not to say that suspense, I mean, it's not the only characteristic of a book that makes it, but just the way that it's laid out in Rebecca was just, it was a really captivating read.
Exactly.
It was an experience. So yeah, I guess I'd have to pick Rebecca, surprisingly to me.
Did I spoil it at all for you?
No, not at all.
I tried to avoid
You
that.
did? Yeah, I know you did.
Oh my god, dude.
Nope.
I was so close to talking to it about it. For context, little peer behind the scenes, pulling back the curtain a bit, seeing the guy, talking into the microphone. Boom and I avoid talking to each other about literature outside of the podcast, in the hopes of avoiding just spoiling things for each other and spoiling talking points and sounding as though we're scripted. For instance, the reason we talked about candy for 5 minutes in the previous episode is the fact that it took us multiple takes to do To Kill a Mockingbird, mostly due to the fact that it's almost vapid. And with this book, it's come so easily that I avoided talking to it about Boom, but there's so much you could talk about that it's it was almost pointless to try and avoid talking to it about him. I just I really wanted to preserve the suspense of the novel.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you did. I feel like if I, like, for those of you who haven't read it and are still here, I feel like I wouldn't have got quite as much enjoyment, and I feel
Yeah.
like if you would have told me the ending before I read it, I wouldn't have liked it as much as Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Because that was the whole thing, not knowing and needing to know. It made it an experience for me that I really liked, and if I would have already known, then there would have been no point in that.
Maybe as a special we could revisit it. Because
Yeah.
I feel as though there is serious enjoyment to be had by rereading it and looking for clues within it.
I think that's a good idea.
Exactly.
That would be really neat.
And focusing on things other than the suspense, because the way this ratchets up tension and trying to figure out what happened to Rebecca, is she alive? Did she kill herself? What were the circumstances? Is it going to be exposed? Who knows? Does Danvers know? In this case, you're sitting there trying to guess what's going to happen. But if you reread it, you're given the chance to look for plot points and details that you may have buffed over on your way in the hopes
absolutely.
of racing towards the end. Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is a Mario Kart track. Exactly. We're racing towards the finish. We're not able to take in all the funny imagery of the mushrooms and all that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sit back. Don't worry about winning this race.
Exactly.
Just check out all the work that these animators did.
Yeah, you're cruising the second time. Exactly.
Well, yeah, and I think I can already see where that would be pretty interesting, because the whole time when they talk about it a little at the end there, but how Maxim is sick for a while after Rebecca dies, and he's pacing all the time.
Yup.
They say that at the very beginning. Like, all he does is pace. He got really sick. He's white when he hears Rebecca.
And you assume
And you're like,
the best.
he is completely grief-stricken.
Exactly. He's a
man who
mourning,
lost the
widowed
love.
man.
Rebecca sounds amazing from
Mhm.
everyone who talks about her.
Exactly.
This poor guy. Then she wears Rebecca's outfit to the ball.
Yep.
And he is really upset.
Yeah.
Like, just angry, and not so much like in a sad way. Not like devastated, but just
He's in a rage.
extremely mad at her for doing that. And you at the time you're just like, oh, he's mad.
Exactly.
That's his wife. But then looking back after you know that, it's like, wow,
Yeah.
maybe
Mhm.
he hated that chick.
And
he
kind of
loves her.
Yep.
So to see her, the one he actually loves, imitate a person that he absolutely despised, had to suck, and could make him mad.
And this plays into the Gothic tropes because, for whatever reason, Gothic literature touches on incest quite a bit. And in this case, she is impregnated, it seems, by a cousin, if I'm remembering correctly. And
Yes.
Maxim has yet to have an heir with Rebecca. So she carries this child to term, and he is born. He will be the heir. And he won't be able to tell anyone about it, because then it'll be like, oh, you let your wife get impregnated by another man whose child will now be the heir to your estate. And it ate at him. It bothered him.
Yeah,
and
there's
Rebecca,
no way to get out of that
Yup.
without disgrace.
Exactly. And Rebecca rubbed salt in the wound and taunted him about it. This is not victim blaming. I promise.
She was asking for it.
Yeah, look at what she was wearing. Of course she was going to get murdered. No. Sinking Rebecca in her ship was a bad choice. However,
Murder's not okay.
exactly. Boom and Spice crime advice.
We
Don't commit.
murder here.
Do not kill people. Please. Especially not in honor of Boom and Spice book advice.
Yeah. Oh, well, they said.
Exactly.
She was a
asking for it.
trifling woman.
Exactly. So I had to kill my wife. No. No, please. God. In the case that
If
you
1/8 of our 8 people who might watch this ends up killing people, that's a horrible record.
Oh my God.
We'll be sunk.
Exactly. My empire will be ruined. My hubris, my greed. It's all into this. Oh man, I'm Maxim. That's it. I'm. Whew. So, it really it's interesting because you catch that other side, where it's like Rebecca's not who she seems, and then it's like he's surrounded by her presence, this woman who now sits at the bottom of a lake, ready to be brought back to the surface in a very literal and figurative sense. That's good symbolism. That is good symbolism. Not naming a dog Tim Johnson.
This series is just gonna be.
Oh my God. Yeah, the hate on Harper Lee hour.
Just the be mean to Kill a Mockingbird.
It deserves it, and especially in this case.
Yeah, the fact that it got a whole episode at full length is our gift to it.
Exactly. And the fact that I think about doing the sequel to it on April Fool's Day. It's got to be April Fool's Day. It can't be any other day. Real review, just not a real choice. Boom. Would you recommend this for other people? Now that we're in the spoiler section.
Now,
With spoilers.
With spoilers. I'm still going to recommend it to other people. I think for the pure thrill alone.
I see. Sorry about that.
We're
sorry.
synchronizing our watches.
Exactly. I'm a boomer, so I couldn't read a screen. So, exactly. Sorry, guys. Yeah, Mr. Chinos and sweaters and New Balances over here. I need glasses like Boom.
For the thrill, for the suspense alone, this book would be worth a look. But
Absolutely.
To have the solid symbolism and almost supernatural aspect of a character that you don't even get to meet, I think that this would be a good read for anybody looking for it. And if you're looking into getting into some Gothic reading.
Exactly, Gothic literature. Yeah. It fulfills a lot of the tropes. And I like weird books. I've got a similar taste in movies. I'm known in my house as the guy that reads weird books and watches weird movies. And this book fulfills that category in terms of the unnamed protagonist. That it sort of uncenters you. It throws a wrench into the mix. That you are so inconsequential that you are left literally nameless. And that is something that is held true through the adaptations. It is absolutely paramount that that's the case, because otherwise you lose a little bit of the classism aspect to it, and you lose some of the sheer overbearing nature of Rebecca's presence. And it's truly awe-inspiring that someone could be that clever. It reminds me of, do you know Albert Camus?
I do.
Yeah, he did The Stranger, he
Yep.
did The Plague, which we got to talk about The Plague at some point, which that's another weird one. But the weird book by Albert Camus that I'm thinking of is entitled, oh man, The Fall. And I'm pretty sure in French it was like La Chute, something like that. La Chute. And um, it's discussing a man in Amsterdam who you meet in a bar. It's told from second person point of view in not a choose your own adventure style way. Like you did this, then you did that. Or you did this and then you did that. No. It's as if I'm talking to you and you are giving me responses that, based on what I say, you can guess what you said. But it also sort of uncenters you from the novel. It's disorienting. And if to give an example, people do this as a one man act or a one man play often, where they have you talking to the audience, where it's like, "So, just arrived to Amsterdam. It's your first time in Mexico City, which is the name of the bar." It's like, "Hey, garçon," and he calls over the barkeep, and oh, my friend doesn't know like French. It's shocking. That sort of, and like, oh, so you're from Algiers? Oh, I've got a mother-in-law in Algiers. Telling me you've been to the beach, and it's like you can guess. It's like fill in the blank a bit, like a Mad Lib, but
Yep,
good.
I see where you're at.
Yeah, but it's so disorienting that it's like, oh man, this guy's really leading me along. Like, it feels as though you're being like taken advantage of. And it's similar here. But instead, I know who I am in The Fall, but I don't know what I'm saying. I know what she says in Rebecca, but I don't know who she is. That's a really interesting way of going about it. And I'm glad Daphne du Maurier decided that.
Daphne du Maurier.
That's the first time I've heard you say that name.
Yep, that's one of them words where if I hadn't heard it before I'd said it, I'd say it differently.
Like a hick.
Than how I'd heard it.
Du Maurier?
Yep.
Oh yeah, I love that book, Rebecca, by Daphne du Maurier.
Du Maurier.
Du Maurier? It's reminiscent. There's this composer, very divisive composer that I've sang a few times, named Ralph Vaughan Williams, and it's spelt Ralph, but it's definitely Ralph. And it's weird. I don't know why. Ralph Vaughan Williams, weird composer. Like, there's this line in one of his pieces called Five Mystical Songs, where this sort of Jesus allegory character is like, lay down and taste my meat. And he like definitely means it as in like, like the bread of life sort of thing. And we have to like echo him. And the first day I did that song, my my director had to be like, all right guys, he's gonna say something funny and you can't laugh. Like, we know it's funny. Everyone thinks it's funny. You cannot laugh. And it's really similar in that way to Rebecca in terms of the pronunciation of Daphne du Maurier. You gotta get that right. Albert Camus, Daphne du Maurier, Ralph Vaughan Williams. It didn't fit entirely, but I tried to rope it back around. I just thought that was a funny little anecdote. It's not a lie either. I forget what movement it is, but it's definitely one of the Five Mystical Songs. If you want to look it up. It's good. It's got a soloist and everything. I couldn't say enough good things about Rebecca.
Yep, this was a breath of fresh air compared to episode 2.
Yeah,
I feel like we're going to keep that trend going, at least for a little bit, at least for one more episode. This is another one that I'm new to.
A room of one's own is more important than most books, and it's a little drier in terms of it's not a roller coaster. It's like in like the monorails at Disney where you're overseeing like big sweeping areas of the park and it takes you from A to B, where the journey is not the point. It's the themes that you draw from it that guide you. And that's almost the opposite of Rebecca. The end point is incredibly important in Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
However, remove the tension, remove the suspense, and you're left with just a murder mystery, which would be a grave disservice to the genre of Gothic literature. This book deserves your attention, and it absolutely deserves praise. And if you have the opportunity, please read Rebecca. Watch the movie. It will change the way you think about literature from Britain, literature in the Gothic literature genre, and generally how you view romantic literature as a whole. And I hope at some juncture I'm given the chance to compare and contrast it and The Great Gatsby, because I feel as though those two pieces run parallel together, and comparing the two is really it leads to very revelatory thinking.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
it's
I'm sure
fantastic.
We'll get there.
Exactly. Oh no.
Matter of time.
Yeah, exactly. We'll read all the books. Don't
Yep.
you worry. All of them. Think about all the books you like. We're gonna read them, and we're gonna rip them to shreds, just like To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, don't be tossing
Nonsense.
that kind
Ass.
of book over
Exactly.
here.
If you give us a recommendation, we'll slam dunk it. Make it look
Yeah.
ridiculous.
See recommendations.
Yeah, recommendation. Exactly.
Maybe one day we'll get around to that, reading that book. And
Yeah, exactly.
Throw it right in the trash.
Yeah, we still haven't had the chance to read our book for recommendations.
Yeah, I don't know if we've even. This may even be spoilers to the introduction to recommendations. I don't remember, but there
Ladies
might in the future be a segment called Recommendations, where we may read Murder on the Alchemist.
The Alchemist.
Okay.
The Alchemist.
I know our friend.
By somebody. But by an author.
So yeah, we got books to read. I guess that's
Exactly.
what happens when you start a book podcast.
Would you like to give them a little peer into future installments?
Yeah. So we've been coming up with a couple ideas here because there's a lot of books we'd like to read that don't quite fall into this. Books you might find in a curriculum,
Yeah.
kind of outlet.
Scholastic.
Yeah. So we're kind of tossing around the ideas of we've mentioned the Lovecraft.
Yep.
Getting into that critical view of those books, what we can gain, what to recognize.
Exactly. What you need to toss
Yeah.
after acknowledging it.
We were kind of tossing around more of a sci-fi, something like that, where we go into books that maybe we have been wanting to read. I know that's more my lane.
Yeah.
As we've been kind of.
Yeah, maybe some Bradbury,
yeah.
some Frank Herbert, maybe.
We're kind of I know I've been reading on my own time a little bit of Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Oh, we've been talking about Jules Verne quite a
so
bit. Yep.
Might get into some of that.
Exactly. That might play into some Victor Hugo, some of that Les Miserables.
Yeah.
Exactly. French literature is rich. There's a lot of good French literature.
Yeah.
The Off the Beaten Path series, the sort of just weird books that I read on my time. The Fall will I love The Fall so much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have time between Rebecca and A Room of One's Own, please take some time out to read The Fall. It's not long, and
It's not long.
it's so
worth
fun.
your time.
It's so much fun. Albert Camus is a great author. We've talked about getting into some philosophy, comparing authors, contemporary authors. The books in the pipeline as we speak. Virginia Woolf's A Room of One... Man, I can't talk today. Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own is certainly on the docket. That is next. Then we've been discussing something by Maya Angelou. Probably, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That sort of... that's probably it. But we could read something else. Maybe Toni Morrison. I'd love to read some Toni Morrison for this. Or, if we wanted to tie it back to Gothic literature, maybe some Octavia Butler, maybe Kindred by her. That one also fits the abode and the incest sort of themes within it. There's a lot of good books, guys, I promise.
Yep, this is one of them things. The more we look into these and we talk about what we want to do, the list grows, the mountain
Exactly.
gets taller.
And
But we're going to take it one book at a time.
exactly.
And one short story and one poem at a time.
Exactly. And one Friends book, and one H.P. Lovecraft book, and adaptations of books. The thing is, here's some Boom and Spice book advice for you. If you let yourself get bogged down in the potential of how much you can read, you'll never fulfill the potential for how much you could read. I've read more literature than most, but I have not read nearly as much literature as I want to. And there's a place where I get really good recommendations. It's a YouTube series entitled Better Than Food Book Reviews, which is similar to Boom and Spice book advice. The difference being his books are always good, and our books are sometimes bad. That's the main difference. Ours are scholastic and meant to be PG. So, in that case, that's where I get my weird books more often than not.
Okay.
And I don't watch his videos anymore because there's so much I need to read. I've got a notes page that I delete a book from every time I read
Just
it.
working your list.
Exactly, and then I'll get back into them, but there's so much.
Yeah, mine has been a little bit sporadic lately just because, reading the podcast books that don't end up taking a ton of time so far.
Yep.
And then every once in a while I get on this Jules Verne kick out of nowhere, and then almost by the time, like, as soon as I finish Rebecca and we're starting to think about our next book,
Yep.
I'm halfway through the Journey to the Center of the Earth. And it's just one of them things. I've wanted to read the book, but then when you start to look at this mountain of books where you might read them, it's just you just got to open the cover up.
Yep, exactly. And that's why we started the short story series. Every short story we talk about, if I can help it, it will be free. You can find it online with no digging, no need for pirating or scanning. It will be free, published online. And it's always relatively short, concise, and it will be an entertaining read. The next two short stories on our docket are Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka and The Swimmer by John Cheever. If you read Raymond Carver from our previous few episodes, and to a lesser extent Anton Chekhov, John Cheever fits that mold quite well. And then with Franz Kafka, there is no mold that you could really throw him into, and that's a good thing. He is one of the most absurd writers that you'll ever read, and I'm excited not only to touch on Metamorphosis, but to touch on many more stories by Franz Kafka as we move along within that series. So if you don't have the time for novels, which really you do, you just don't utilize it.
Yeah, it's just like a whole bunch of short stories.
Exactly. Take it in. Same with the poetry potluck.
Yeah.
And, hey, if you want to bring your own poetry to the potluck, don't be afraid to send it to us.
Yeah,
I'll take
let
it.
us know.
Exactly. We'll make it a 3-person potluck for a week.
Yeah, and
exactly.
the same with some of these series. If you guys, if any of you out there have a book or maybe
Exactly.
a segment idea you think might be cool for us to cover,
Or
we'd
hate
like to
mail.
read, we might read it. Or hate mail.
Please.
If maybe
My
To Kill a
ego.
Mockingbird was your
jam.
favorite, let us know
Exactly.
why.
Maybe Harper Lee Jr. over here. Just it sounds like Weenie Hut Jr. Harper Lee Jr. If you're the reincarnated spirit of Harper Lee, and you're just desperate to get our goat over it, please go right ahead. Any engagement's good. Other than that one comment we got that was just a bot.
That was just soul wrenching.
Oh,
We get our first comment over here, and
It
it's
was
not a real person.
devastating. Oh my god.
So anyone, give us a good job or something, or a bad job, but be a real person.
Does it sound like the thumbs down emoji? Fine. Exactly. Maybe just like the winky emoticon, make us guess. Exactly. Good, bad, it's a book. Back to Rebecca, just to close out.
Yep, there.
It's a great book. Don't let it be spoiled for you. It's so old, but so absent in our culture in terms of reference points. You can go the rest of your life without knowing what happens. You shouldn't. You should read this book. And then next week, it's the shortest book we've read thus far, I believe. Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. Excited for you to join us.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead and check out some of our other stuff. We're going to be trying to get some poetry potluck up here and some short stories too. So we'll see you over there as well. I've been Boom.
And I've been Spice, and you've been advised.